Welcome to the US Daily Brief channel. Tension levels continue to rise in the NATO territorial waters in the Baltic Sea. With Sweden and Finland making their NATO membership applications officially, Russia increased its activities in the region. Even if Russia cannot react in the strongest way because of the war it has entered in Ukraine, it threatens the Baltic Sea countries enough. In retaliation for the Baltops 22 exercise carried out by NATO in the Baltic Sea, Russia conducted exercise in the region with 60 warships and 40 warplanes. This move was seen as an effort to impose Russia's presence in the region. The event that took place today showed that the Russian Navy is now making more daring moves. Danish territorial waters north of the Baltic Sea violated twice by a Russian warship. This move was seen by the Denmark as an unacceptable provocation. The Danish armed forces said in a statement that the Russian corvette entered NATO waters twice, passing near the islands of Christiansø near Bornholm. The incident took place on an island in Danish territorial waters while a festival attended by a senior law enforcement and businessman was in process. Following the Danish Navy's radio message, the ship immediately left the area. The island of Christiansø is located 300 kilometers from the Kaliningrad region of Russia. For this reason, it has been talked about for a long time that the island could be an open target for possible attacks by Russia. However, this move came with Sweden and Finland's move to join the alliance. The Danish armed forces said in a statement that the Russian warships entered Danish waters without permission at 12:30 this morning, and a few hours later, a Russian corvette entered Danish territorial waters north of the Christiansø later that night. The same corvette again crossed the territorial waters border north of the Christiansø. After a call from the Navy's Naval Task Force to the civilian VHF radio, the Russian warship promptly left Danish territorial waters. Danish Foreign Minister Jeppe Kofod said on Twitter that the move was an extremely irresponsible, rude and completely unacceptable Russian provocation in the middle of the Danish Festival of Democracy. The Russian ambassador in Denmark was summoned immediately after the incident, and Kofod stated that the tyrannical methods used by Russia would not work against Denmark. There is no immediate threat to the festival or Bornholm. Danish Defense Minister Morten Bødskov told local media, referring to the armed forces. "We must acknowledge that the Baltic Sea has become a high-voltage zone," said Bødskov, adding that this is not the first time Russia has violated Danish territory. Ukrainian defense minister said last month that the country has started receiving Harpoon missiles from Denmark, and that the deliveries are the result of cooperation between several countries. On Friday, Ukrainian forces allegedly hit a Russian naval tugboat in the Black Sea with 2 Harpoon missiles, and for the first time struck a Russian ship with Western-supplied anti-ship weapons. This can be seen as an issue that needs to be answered for Russia, and this sudden attack by Russia may have been due to this event. The tension between the Baltic countries and Russia actually dates back to the ancient times. These countries, which are the maritime borders of Russia, constantly felt the Russian threat, but Russia's attempt to invade Ukraine made things clear. Now Russian President Vladimir Putin had pressed the start button. He had no intention of stopping if he could invade Ukraine. So how can we be sure that Russia never invaded the Baltic states? How can we guarantee this? It seems that Russia will not be able to make a new invasion attempt for now, due to the invasion of Ukraine, which we have entered into its 4th month. And with its army worn out in this war, whatever happens, Russian President Vladimir Putin may continue his recklessness and go into the regional turmoil as Finland and Sweden join NATO. In fact, Putin expresses this between the lines of his statements. Here, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are geographically at a disadvantage to Russian aggression. Considering today's conditions, the highest risk that can occur in the event of an attack amongst NATO members seems to be in these countries. However, Russia will not choose to target NATO members under any circumstances. In this case, Sweden and Finland are more vulnerable to Russian aggression, and these concerns led them to apply for NATO membership. Russian military activity on this Finnish borderline confirms similar concerns. Many neighboring countries are re-evaluating their own defense policies should Russian aggression reach its limits. Even Germany, which followed the default policy on non-aggression after the Second World War, committed to purchasing F-35 fighter jets from the United States, anticipating the need for self-defense. Even Sweden and Finland, which have never voiced the idea of NATO in the past years, continue their efforts to join NATO as soon as possible. In fact, rumors arose in May about Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO, and in the response to these rumors, Russia threatened all Baltic states and NATO with the repositioning nuclear weapons into the Baltic region. At this point, it seems that this threat is an empty threat. With these threats, Russia could not turn Finland and Sweden onto the NATO path. However, Russia's aggressive behavior continues. There may be several prominent reasons why the Baltic states are target of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The fact that Estonia and Latvia in particular have been ethnic Russian minority population puts these countries in a similar position to Ukraine. However, the main difference is that these countries are members of NATO. Moscow's justification for previous occupations, including the ongoing occupation of Ukraine, is that ethnic Russians must be liberated from non-Russian oppressive governments. This inevitably shows that these two Baltic states must always be on their toes, but geographically plays an important role in contributing to the vulnerability of the Baltic states. Countries like Finland, which shares an 80-mile border with Russia, and Poland, which borders Russia's ally Belarus, are relatively disconnected geographically from their allies. But besides this disconnect, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania do not have close allies in the Baltic region. The three countries are essentially sandwiched between Russia and the Baltic Sea, with several NATO allies nearby. In terms of logistics, this means that it will be difficult to send troops and supplies to the Baltic states in a short time in the event of Russian attack. On the other hand, Estonia and Lithuania are border partners with Russia. Worse still, Latvia is besieged by the heavily armed Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, loaded with nuclear-capable Iskander-M missiles. Finland and Sweden are seen here as the two countries that can provide the fastest supports to Latvia. However, these two countries, whose applications processes are still ongoing, are still not NATO members. Russia could have planned to somehow squeeze the Baltic states. However, after the invasion attempt of February 24 and the heavy blows received by the Russian army, it seems that this possibility has completely disappeared. To compensate for this geographical disadvantage, the Baltic states should be strengthened, possibly as soon as possible, with additional military support from NATO allies in the form of additional troops or weapon systems. The UK initially provided substantial support to these countries, and NATO has announced that it will double the number of troops stationed in the Baltic states. Currently, there are 9,000 NATO troops in Estonia, 9,100 in Latvia, and 20,800 in Lithuania. It has been announced that these soldiers are permanent in the region. However, Richard Skols, head of the Latvian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, expressed his gratitude to his allies for these reinforcements, but that these reinforcements were definitely not enough. In this regard, war experts claim that Russia can be deterred more harshly if NATO delivers the systems that are planned or delivered to Poland in the last period to these three countries in the Baltic. These systems are F-35 warplanes, Pyrrhus missile systems, and M1A2 Abrams tanks. At this point, the participation of Finland and Sweden in the alliance and the aid to these countries from the north may completely prevent Russia's moves. For this reason, Finland's participation in the NATO is of critical importance. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania may need more military support now more than ever, as all three have exhausted their own weapons reserves to aid Ukraine. There is no better moment than now to prepare for the second offensive of Russian aggression in Europe. Russia is currently in a weak position, and this should be seen as the most important moment for preparation. Nowhere is NATO's credibility more at risk than in the Baltic states.